Well, hello everyone. Thank you for joining me. Today we are going to be doing my belated Black History Month book review, the Writers and Readers Edition. I'll explain that in a minute. I'm so happy to be doing this. We have 4 books to review. And stay tuned to the end because I'm going to give my final recommendations in order of what I like. I'm also going to be telling you guys the books I want to review next time. Let's get started. We're going to do 4 books. The Sweetness of Water, American Ghoul, I'm Nobody's Slave, and Yellow Wife. I was supposed to do Death of an Author, but I had to turn it back into the library, so I didn't finish it. I had been reading 2 books. That's where Yellow Wife comes in. So my goal is to do book review about 6 to 8 weeks. That will give me time and hopefully you time to read the books for the next session. Again, we're going to be doing 4 books at a time. And 6 to 8 weeks is about doable. That helps me. I could probably read a book a week, but child, I got too much going on. I'm writing. Y'all know I'm doing the authortube thing, so calm down. I will give you all, like I said, the list of the 4 books we're going to do next time and the approximate date, 6 to 8 weeks from this day. Some of you may not have read these books, and I want you to read them and get your own opinion about them. I do not do spoilers. I will be giving a summary, the publisher's summary, the basic plan of the book. That is LaRue playing in his new box. Oh my gosh, she got the zoomies. However, in my review of the book, I'll give maybe a little bit more information. You'll see what I mean. Writers and Readers Edition. Let me explain what that means. So, when I read a book, I read it for, enjoyment, right? Or research. Not that research is not enjoyable. I love research. Y'all know that. When I'm reading a book as a reader, it is different than when I'm reading a book as a writer. I have a list of criteria when I read the book as the reader, and then there's a list of criteria that I use when I'm reading the book as a writer. And so I will list the criteria here. And this is the format I think would be okay to use. If y'all don't like it, just tell me. Maybe I can make some little corrections or whatever. In reading a book as a reader, you're going to get something different than reading a book as a writer. I'll have a reader review, and then we'll have the writer review, and then we'll have the recommendation. The first book that I read was The Sweetness of Water. The author is Nathan Harris, and here's his bio. Nathan Harris is a Missioner Fellow at the University of Texas. He was awarded the Kidd Prize as judged by Anthony Doerr and was also a finalist for the Tennessee Williams Fiction Prize. He won an Audie Award for Audiobook of the Year and an Audie Award for Best Male Narrator in 2021. The Audie is a premier awards program in the United States, recognizing distinction in audiobooks and spoken word entertainment. The Audie Awards are kind of like the Oscars for audiobooks. That's a huge honor. Congratulations to him. And he lives in Austin, Texas. Boom. This was his debut historical, I want to call it a historical literary fiction. Here's the review. And I'm going to start with the publisher's summary. In the waning days of the Civil War, brothers Pinterest and Landry, freed by the Emancipation Proclamation, seek refuge on the homestead of George Walker and his wife Isabel. The Walkers, racked by the loss of their only son to the war, hired the brothers to work their farm, hoping through an unexpected friendship to stanch their grief. Prentice and Landry, meanwhile, plan to save money for the journey north and a chance to reunite with their mother, who was sold away when they were boys. Parallel to their story runs a forbidden romance between two Confederate soldiers. The young men recently returned from the war to the town of Old Ox, like a fictional place, in Georgia. Okay. Hold their, trysts in the woods. But when their secret is discovered, the resulting chaos, including a murder, unleashes convulsive repercussions on the entire community. In the aftermath of so much turmoil, it is Isabel who emerges as an unlikely leader, proffering a healing vision for the land and for the newly free citizens of Old Ox. With candor and sympathy, debut novelist Nathan Harris creates an unforgettable cast of characters depicting Georgia in the violent crucible of Reconstruction. Equal parts beauty and terror, as gripping as it is moving, The Sweetness of Water is an epic whose grandeur locates humanity and love amid the most harrowing circumstances. I'm going to give you the forms that the book comes in. This particular book comes in hardcover, paperback, Kindle, and audiobook. Then I'll give you the cost. And so the cost for this book within those formats of the book range from $9.29, up to $14.99, and that's if you get the audio subscription, and then you can, listen to the book that way, which I don't, really listen to audiobooks, but seeing as he won an award, I might go back and listen to him, narrate this book. Anywho, that $9.29 right now, and that is for, I want to say that's for the paperback, that's a sale price. It's normally $18.99 and up. Does the book fulfill what is promised in the summary that the publisher gave? And in my opinion, yes, it did fulfill the promise. The next question is, does the book haunt me? And what I mean by that is, does it continue to make you think? Does it continue to make you feel certain emotions well after you've read the book? And for me, I'm going to say, yes, this book haunted me. And that's a good thing. The last piece of the reader review is going to be a score on a scale from 1 to 10. For this book, I gave it an 8. And the only reason why I gave it an 8 is because it is a historical fiction. I feel that many readers of historical fiction may have wanted a little bit more in the book when it comes to historical events. And that is the only reason why I gave it a lower score. For me, it was fine how it was written. He did put some historical facts and events in there, but I know that some people who read historical fiction are solely trying to read that manuscript for as many historical facts as they can get. Why they go to historical fiction is beyond me. It is fiction. We know that historical fiction has a lot of research in it, and therefore a lot of historical fiction writers will put a lot of events or historical people or facts, that kind of thing. I felt this was a historical literary fiction, and so I looked more at the literary. It was a tipping scale, 40% historical, 60% literary, and that's what I like. I feel the author brought the essence of the historical time period. Now, the writer review portion of this, again, is going to look at how I looked at this as a writer. And I'm going to read my notes. I like the research and the backstory woven throughout the book without seeming as if it was kind of forced on you. Don't shove it down my throat, okay? Back up. Anywho, I adored the tempo, the pacing. I adored the character development, the story, the plot, and everything just kind of gelled together. Because I am a sensitivity reader, I kind of looked at that part. Within this book, there were 2 sensitivity groups: formerly enslaved African Americans and also LGBTQIA plus characters. I thought the way the author wrote the story of each group was carefully and honestly portrayed for the time period. I'm glad he brought up a subject many have tried to hide within our history, especially as it pertains to LGBTQIA plus, people during this time. You don't hear a lot about that, and so I am glad that he brought that to the forefront. Also, when I'm looking from a writer's perspective, I'm trying to find out what is it within this work I can learn, right? And so in this manuscript, I learned there's much work to be done to bring these types of stories forward. I learned how to depict in a fresh way genuine emotion through characters, despite discussing the challenging subjects and topics of the time period. And this book really did renew my passion for language. He has beautiful language in here, and the ability to go with my gut versus what I feel like a lot of people in the publishing industry have as norms regarding prose. And that is not to say that he went off on a tangent and had a whole bunch of purple prose. No, it is a way to use language, and his writing is kind of more in line with the style of writing that I like. Some people don't tend to like the fluidity of language as much, so the language in the book is more of my style. As far as the writing review, I gave it a score of 8.5. To me, it was a fantastic debut novel. Just fantastic. He gives me hope. And if you can write a first book like this, can't even imagine what kind of book he's going to be writing later. I know he has written a book. It comes out, I want to say, either sometime this month or in May, and it's called Amity, Amity. I will be looking at that. This young man, I think he's probably like early 30s now. His book was selected by Oprah's book club and longlisted for the Booker Prize. I look forward to reading more of his work. The Sweetness of Water. Moving on. The next book we have is called American Ghoul. It is by Michelle McGill Vargas, and this is her bio. Michelle McGill Vargas writes speculative historical fiction, short stories, and flash fiction. Her work has appeared in Splickety Magazine, the Copperfield Review, and Type House. She is a member of the Highland Writers Group and the Valparaiso. Listen. Okay. I'm trying. Writers Group has served as vice president of the Indiana Writers Consortium and is currently on the board of the Midwest Writers Workshop and the Historical Novel Society. She actually was one of the committee members for the Diversity Scholarship I just recently participated in as a judge. She currently resides in the Midwest with her husband and fur babies. This was her debut historical fiction, a horror story. Now, I'm not into horror, but I challenged myself and I said, let me go ahead and read this horror story. So, let's get to this. You can't kill someone who's already dead. That's what Lavinia keeps telling her jailer after allegedly killing her mistress, Simone Arsenault. But how could Simone be dead when she was taking callers just a few minutes before? And why was her house always so dark? Lavinia, a recently freed slave, met Simone, a recently undead vampire, by chance on a plantation in post-Civil War Georgia. With nothing remaining for either woman in the South, the two form a fast friendship and head north. However, Lavinia quickly learns that teaming up with this white woman may be more than she bargained for. Simone is reckless and impulsive, which would have been bad enough on its own, but when combined with her particular diet, Lavinia finds herself in way for her head. As she is forced to repeatedly compromise her morals and struggles to make lasting human connections, Lavinia begins to wonder, is she truly free, or has she merely exchanged one form of enslavement for another? As bodies start to pile up in the small Indiana town they've settled in, people start to take a second look at the two newcomers, and Simone and Lavinia's relationship is stretched to its breaking point. Now, this book is hardcover, paperback, Kindle, and audiobook. The price is $9.99 to $26.80, depending on the format you choose. Do I feel like this book fulfilled its promise? Somewhat. And the reason why I'm saying that is because some of the questions I had as a reader may be answered in a sequel, if that makes sense. For the most part it did, but again, that may be me just, how readers do. They be like, oh, well, what? What about this? What about that? How would this go? I'm one of them people. Okay, so what you call it? Like a book club people? You got questions after the book? That's me. So I will say for me, it fulfilled the promise. I want to say 90%, but there were some lingering questions, and I do believe she has book club questions, and so I think this would be a good book for a book club. Okay, I did not feel as if this particular story haunted me, did not occur in this particular situation, because this was a historical horror fiction, but she had an element of comedy in it. Go figure, right? Adding in that kind of eased the traumatic burden that a lot of historical fictions during this time period, when they're addressing slavery and stuff, wouldn't have. And so I believe that's why it didn't haunt me. Also, I did want her to go a little bit more deeper into that, but again, the mix of horror and comedy was so surprising to me. I think it kind of threw me off from the feeling I normally get when I'm reading these type of books that make you think. It was almost like she brought out something, and then before you could really dive into it and really let it settle in you, a piece of comedy came into play. Some people just react differently to that. For me, it made it not be a book that quote unquote haunted me based on the definition I gave before. I rated this book a 7.5. The reason why I rated it that is because, again, some questions I felt maybe could have been answered, but now I'm thinking maybe it's because she's having a sequel to it. I'm not sure. Definitely would be questions I would ask in a book club. As her debut, I thought it was well written. It was my first dive into horror, and so I think even that part I had to get used to a little bit. The author added in humor to the story, and that was a very surprising mix for me. I wasn't expecting that from the summary of the book. Okay, to me the story was reminiscent of, what's that woman, what's her name, Scheherazade telling of a story to the Persian king, right? The chapters made you always have a question at the end, quite a few cliffhangers, and there's always a way to end your chapter. I would have liked it to be a little bit more mixed up, maybe with the chapter ending devices, so that there was more of a balance. I kind of felt like I was on edge at the end of every chapter, and it does make you want to continue the story and just be like, oh, what happens next? Well, I'll tell you that, tomorrow. So it was kind of like that. And again, everybody has their flow. I do not know the elements of horror stories. I don't know if that's how the flow goes. So again, I'm ignorant on that. And I'm putting that into the mix as well. I'm not familiar with the horror genre like that. So if you are, and that's how it goes, let me know in the comments. So the sensitivity part. The main sensitivity group were the black characters who had been formerly enslaved. There was a free black person in the story as well. She portrayed well-known stereotypes within the main black character. I kind of wish she had gone a little bit beyond those stereotypes. The main character almost became like a minor character to me because of her depiction in the book, which I'm not sure the author intended after reading the book summary, right? Her minor black characters did not fare much better. I feel like, yes, we can talk about the stereotypes and things, but after we get the stereotypes discussed, I would rather have seen the characters then rise above those stereotypes. What did I learn? So I learned to think outside the box by mixing genres like horror and comedy. I mean, I don't know. I've never read that before, especially in the context of the situation within this book, which is Reconstruction and slavery and stuff like that. So to me, mixing the two genres in a unique way, I think she did that wonderfully. It was just a combination I was not expecting. And I like to read books that prize you in some ways. I wound up giving her an overall score of 7.5. And again, preference is preference. There were some scenes in the book that kind of grossed me out, but some other people may love it. And so I will not give up on horror, especially if it's this kind of horror where it's got some comedy in it. But yeah, that is American Ghoul. And as we always do, let's give some support for our new channel, SHOUTOUT. All right, the next book on our list, I Am Nobody's Slave, written by Lee Hawkins Jr. Lee Hawkins Jr. is an American investigative journalist and author who was a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize in 2022. His work documents the lives of Black American descendants of slavery and survivors of Jim Crow, focusing on the intergenerational impact of racial violence and racism on their families. His reporting addresses individuals affected by multiple adverse childhood experiences, exploring childhood trauma and its long-term effects on health and life expectancy. Hawkins' speeches examine the enduring impact of slavery, Jim Crow, segregation, and integration on the Black family and America as a whole. He aims to facilitate truth, reconciliation, and healing between Black and white families with legacies on opposite sides of slavery, drawing on his experiences with his newly discovered white cousins. Mr. Hawkins is the series creator, co-executive producer, and host of the podcast What Happened in Alabama for American Public Media / Minnesota Public Radio. This was a nonfiction biographical novel. Here is the publisher's summary. I Am Nobody's Slave tells the story of one Black family's pursuit of the American dream through the impacts of systemic racism and racial violence. This book examines how trauma from enslavement and Jim Crow shaped their outlook in thriving in America, influenced each generation, and how they succeeded despite these challenges. To their suburban Minnesota neighbors, the Hawkinses were an ideal American family, embodying strength and success. However, behind closed doors, they faced the legacy of enslavement and apartheid. Lee Hawkins Sr. often exhibited rage, leaving his children anxious and curious about his protective view of the world. 30 years later, his son uncovered the reasons for his father's anxiety and occasional violence. Through research, he discovered violent deaths in his family for every generation since slavery, mostly due to white on black murders, and how white enslavers impacted the family's customs. Hawkins explores the role of racism-triggered childhood trauma. Hawkins explores the role of racism-triggered childhood trauma and chronic stress in shortening his ancestors' lives, using genetic testing, reporting, and historical data to craft a moving family portrait. This book shows how genealogical research can educate and heal Americans of all races, revealing through their story the story of America, a journey of struggle, resilience, and the heavy cost of ultimate success. Whew! Let me tell you, these nonfiction books, they have the longest summaries. My Lord. Anyway, this book comes in these formats: hardcover, Kindle, audiobook, and audio CD. I didn't see a paperback option, but I thought I read it in paperback. Maybe I didn't. I got it from the library, job. Anyway, the cost is anywhere from $14 to $39.29, and I think the $39.29 is the audio CDs. Okay. Did it fulfill its promise? Absolutely yes. Plus, you read his story and how he goes back to, slavery, doing his own research and coming through and seeing how, trauma from slavery all the way up through him. Okay. By the end of the book, the information that he gave was helpful to readers. There was a particular test that he did. I don't want to spoil it, but you can do that test now, online for free. You can discuss it, if you have a mental health professional, something like that. I always feel like when you tell a story and it's nonfiction, biography, you're telling your story and it's not a way to help others. I feel like it misses the mark. And this book did not miss the mark. If you're of the African American race, and you have seen, repeated violence in your family, I implore you to go ahead and take a look at this book. And really, to be honest, I'm not even going to say if you're black. If you're a person who, white or black, in America, who has had ancestors that either were enslaved or were the enslavers, you may find some interesting things in this book that could help you if you are dealing with certain childhood traumas. Okay. Did the book haunt me? Yes, it did. And it did, again, in a good way, because unfortunately I've had some trauma in my family, and I believe that the information he put in the book was a way to continue the healing journey in a wider way. It rejuvenated my yearning to continue my genealogical research that I am doing on my family as well. So it was a combination of things. It addressed the past, it addressed the present, and can haunt you to think about the issues that are presented within the manuscript. My score for this book was a 9 as far as reader. The writing was extremely conversational. I really felt as though I was intruding into this man's house. Like, you ever read a book and the scene is so descriptive, you feel like you're right there peeking in? That is how his book was. The sensitive group were. The author didn't hold back in, acts of racism on generation after generation. Black Americans within his family, including himself, and although extremely challenging, eye-opening. And so I felt he did an A+ job being sensitive to abused children of Black people. I learned that sometimes as an author, you got to write hard stuff to get to the essence of a story. He did. willing to be honest with yourself. He was honest to a fault, okay? And you got to do that. Just learn and grow, okay? I've learned that research is invaluable, and genealogical research is still needed and important for healing and understanding. And so, not about technique, but it's about the emotional. How do you get a reader to get to that emotional level that you're trying to get to? And I feel like the way that he did it in this book was great. How passionate he was about the subject, actually at a school where he was able to talk with children about this and through his writing. And that is what I would like to happen as well. And his overall score I gave was a 9. So that was I Am Nobody's Slave. And our final book of the day is Yellow Wife by Sadiqa Johnson. I think it's Sadiqa or Shadiqua. Lord, I'm going to say Miss Johnson because I don't want to ruin a woman's name, okay? Here's her bio. She is a New York Times bestselling author of 5 novels, including the Reese's Book Club pick, The House of Eve. Her accolades include the 2022 Hurston Wright Foundation Legacy Finalist, a BCALA Literary Honoree, the Library of Virginia's Literary People's Choice Award, and the Phyllis Wheatley Book Award. Born on a plantation in Charles City, Virginia, Phoebe Dolores Brown has lived a relatively sheltered life. Shielded by her mother's position as the estate's medicine woman and cherished by the master's sister, she is set apart from the others on the plantation, belonging to neither world. She'd been promised freedom on her 18th birthday, but instead of the idyllic life she imagined with her true love exes Henry, Phoebe is forced to leave the only home she has ever known. She unexpectedly finds herself thrust into the bowels of slavery at the infamous Devil's Half Acre, a jail in Richmond, Virginia, where the enslaved are broken, tortured, and sold every day. There, Phoebe is exposed not just to her jailer's cruelty, but also to his contradictions. To survive, Phoebe will have to outwit him, and she soon faces the ultimate sacrifice. This book comes in hardcover, paperback, Kindle, audiobook, and audio CD. The prices range from $9.93 to $32.33, with I think the highest price being for the CD. Does this book fulfill its promise? Yes, it does. And more. Did it haunt me? Absolutely it did, because her sacrifices and the environment she endured, plus this book was semi-based off of a true story. It haunted me so much that once I finished reading the book, I went to get information about the real person that this story is based off, a whole story in itself. If you like to read books and then see what happened for real, this is one of those that you should take a look at. I gave it an 8.5. I thought it was beautifully written. I gave it an 8.5 because I still had questions, and I had to go outside of the book to kind of get those answers. Okay, and now as a writer, what did I think? So the author told the story in an engaging way, and although she did have several cliffhangers, she kind of mixed it up so there was a balance with the chapter endings. There was a ebb and flow, right? I like ebb and flow. Some people don't, but I kind of need an ebb and flow. I've read many historical fiction novels, and I find authors who combine the exciting plots with the historical data balances the novel's pacing. And again, that's just a mix I enjoy, just a preference, nothing more. Sensitivity evaluation. So with this book, there were 2 main sensitivity issues. One was, of course, the enslaved and formerly enslaved African Americans, and then there were several mixed race persons within the book. I feel as if the author may have wanted to portray a better outcome of the relationships between many of the Black characters, but was torn between having a glass full versus glass half full type of scenario. And I get that. Historical fiction is extremely challenging to write, and you have to kind of use sometimes undisputed historical facts, and which side of history either you or your ancestors were on can dictate that. To me, she did an excellent job improving the plights of her characters. She stayed true to the historical data and societal norms of the time, so I ain't mad at her, okay? It was a difficult story. In a respect that of the characters and how our nation looks at prior history involving slavery. What did I learn? I learned that to tell a historical fiction, we must be willing to learn and utilize proven historical data, but are not bound to tell a story that is solely through the eyes of those who have written before us. Convey those stories. And that's what I feel historical fiction writers need to try to get to. We may have to use different devices. To wrap this up, we have 3 sides to every story, right? My side, your side, and somewhere in the middle we get the truth. And I feel that that is what historical fiction does. It gets to, or it should try to get to the middle where the truth lies. When we have concrete historical data, we use that, but we also use things outside of that realm, things that weren't brought in when some of that concrete historical data was done. And that could be through oral history, through written history, from people who had to hide stuff. And so we put all those in conjunction together. My score for this book is an 8.5. And I would have scored this higher too, but it's simply because some of the questions I had to go outside the book to find them, but that is okay. It was still a wonderful, wonderful story. Moving on to my recommendation list. Like I said, I gave the reviews in the order that I read them. Now I'm going to give the books that I liked going from bottom to top. And I'll tell you why. American Ghoul is my 4th choice. It is because I'm not really as familiar with that genre. She did write a great book. I love the mix of the history with the comedy. I thought that was very unique. And who would this book appeal to is actually what I want to say too. And oh my gosh, this cat. The Roo, sit down. Oh my gosh. Anywho, he has the zoomies. Sorry. This book would appeal to a person who is really a lover of horror and absolute a lover of vampire stories. And so that's who that book is for. I'm going to say my 3rd choice is Yellow Wife. I love that it was, semi-based on a real person story. I love that she told a story that maybe a lot of people don't know about. And I love the way that she really showed what was going on for certain people in that time period. The story is more for people who like to read historical fiction, but know that there is a true story in the background. And that's who I would suggest that story to. The last 2 books, I went back and forth. And my 2nd choice, even though it scored higher, my 2nd choice is going to be I'm Nobody's Slave. And the reason why I chose that book as my 2nd choice is because I do feel that I got a lot of information that I can use in the future to help my inner child, right? And I love the author's passion. I love that he's working with children to try to hopefully, get them not to be in the same predicament, to be honest, and to heal others who may not even have known that what they were doing was, forms of abuse. That book is going to be for people who have had childhood traumas, for people who may know someone that has been through that, or even people who want to just learn more about how to research their own family histories, especially African American genealogy. So that's who I would recommend that book to. And finally, my favorite book out of all of them is The Sweetness of Water. It is because I love historical fiction. I love literary fiction. I love language. And I think his writing is more in line with what I would, try to write. And I love that combination. I love a good story. I love a story that we haven't heard before. I love for people to be sensitive to different groups. And I'm sorry, I did forget to talk about there's also a disabled person within that story. And he also treated, was sensitive to him in the book. And so that is just the type of story that I like. Again, this is all preference. By no means does my review reflect on any of the writers' writing. They all wrote beautifully. I hope that one day I can, write as well as they write. Just, a little preference for some versus others because of what I like. That's it. That's all. But yeah, The Sweetness of Water. If you haven't read it and you really enjoy literary fiction, you really enjoy historical fiction, it will be a win for you. I implore everyone to, sit down, take a moment and read these books. They all taught me something, and I got enjoyment from all of them. And I think when you read something and it teaches you something, like I got a twofer for real, like the reading part and the writing part. Happy match, right? And they all taught me something about my career path as well. We have debut authors and we have, experienced, almost Pulitzer Prize winners. And to me, the gamut, the line that you can go from here to here, and it's just a wonderful. Writing is just being a writer, becoming a writer. Hopefully, one day becoming a published author. I know it's just going to be a wonderful career path, and I don't even think of it as a career. I just think of it as something I enjoy doing, and I guess maybe that's what we need to do when we're trying to figure out, how to walk along in this life, right? But yes, I implore everyone to try to read these books. I feel like everyone will get something different. If you get something different than what I got, please let me know. Leave it in the comments, okay? Thank you. Each one of them reminded me of the magic that we get from reading books, and the magic that we want to put into our own books, right? Because it's just a magical world. Again, I'm going to try to do these about every 6 to 8 weeks to give everybody a chance to read the books. Even if you don't read all 4 of the books, that I'm looking at trying to do. If you read one, come back then and hey, have at it. All right. So here are the upcoming books. Now, have you read any of the books? If you have, let me know. As you can see on the list, I have 3 solid books that I want to do. And one book, I have not decided on what I want to do. I just know I want to do a debut author. As a person that hasn't, fully written a book, we need to look at other authors that did their journey and they're more closer to us who have not written. So I definitely want to keep debut author in the mix when I'm doing the book reviews. If you have a suggestion, let me know. I'm looking at all genres, so it doesn't matter. Let me know. I really enjoyed this. If you like the way that I'm doing the book reviews with the reader review and then the writer review and then the recommendations, let me know. If you have suggestions, let me know that too. It's fine. It's cool, right? I'm all about improvement. I love to read, I love to write, and it's been great. And on that note, because y'all know I can talk, I'm going to end it here. Again, if you like what you've seen, please, give me a like. If you know somebody who loves book reviews, share the video. Tell them to put in a suggestion. I love that. And in the meantime, in between time, go read some great books and do some happy writing. Bye.